Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Michael Taylor. Alright, we are starting off strong with an absolutely wild one. This story is of course about an Englishman named Michael Taylor, and it comes from 1974. Michael was a husband and father of 5 children, but was unfortunately struggling with frequent bouts of depression, which is difficult for anyone to manage. Seemingly, however, when he met a 21-year-old pastor named Marie Robinson, these bouts became less harsh and much more manageable. So far, this seems like a nice little story about someone getting the help they need, but that is not the case at all. Apparently, he claimed his depression was getting better due to the pastor's ability to exorcise the demons that were plaguing him with this illness. Michael's wife was like, yeah, okay, likely story, and confronts him about what she believes is going on, which is that he is having an affair with Marie. After this confrontation, he physically attacks his wife, which then led to him getting an actual exorcism by 2 ministers on October 5th of 1974. During the exorcism, Michael had seizures, he spit at and bit the ministers, and screamed in tongues. After going through all of that, you'd expect this guy to be free of whatever the heck was going on, but unfortunately, the following day he brutally took the life of his own wife. If all of this wasn't enough to make a dreadful story, he ended up not even being convicted because the defense argued that the exorcism made him insane.
Number 9, the Winchester Mansion. If you're a ghost hunter enthusiast, then the Winchester Mansion must certainly be on your bucket list for places to visit. It's certainly on mine, even though I'm an absolute scaredy cat, we know that. I just find the story so interesting and definitely spooky if you believe the tales. Sarah and her husband William Winchester amassed a huge fortune from their sale of the Winchester rifle. After her daughter died of TB and William left Sarah a widow, she consulted a medium who told her that she would be constantly haunted by the spirits killed by the Winchester rifle, so that could be like millions. She picked up and moved across the country, bought an 8-room farmhouse, and began one of the largest home renos in history. The house never stopped construction until she died in 1922, and then it opened as a museum a year later. It is said the house was built to trap spirits inside. The house contains many oddities like stairs leading to nowhere, drops in the floor like 30 feet, and the overall house is just weird. Her intention for this was to confuse any angry spirits who followed her. The house is 24,000 square feet in size. It has 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 160 rooms, 52 skylights, 47 stairways and fireplaces, 17 chimneys, 13 bathrooms, 6 kitchens, and cost Sarah $5 million to build, about $71 million today. And a turtle dove, jeez. Today it's considered one of the most haunted places in the world and is well worth a visit for anyone seeking a scare. Ooh.
In our number 8 spot today, we have Gottlieben Dittus. This story comes to us from 1842 from a small German village. In this year, residents of the village began to notice some strange happenings coming from the house of a 28-year-old woman named Gottlieben. She was claiming that her house was haunted and began slipping in and out of what people referred to as trance-like states. Other than these claims and what was going on with these states, nothing truly extraordinarily weird was happening, of course, until a religious pastor came along and began performing an exorcism. Gottlieben became super violent, which feels like a pretty fair reaction to an exorcism, whether you are possessed or not, and ended up being physically restrained. Here's where things really go off the rails though. She ended up being restrained for 2 years while multiple exorcisms were performed on her. During these, she was seen vomiting glass, nails, and of course blood. Despite this horrific story, things ended on an alright note, with her telling everyone that the demons were gone and that Jesus is Victor. I don't know why, but that gives me the chills a little bit. I'm just hoping she lived the rest of her life being totally okay.
Number 7, the Bell Witch. The true story of the Bell Witch inspired one of the most terrifying found footage horror films out there, The Blair Witch Project, and as someone who's like terrified of the idea of getting lost in a forest, this is awful, it's terrifying. The story goes as follows and involves the family of John Bell. Apparently he had a wicked neighbor named, not like wicked like wicked, but like wicked, named Kate Batts, who believed that John cheated her out of land. Rumors circulated that she was a witch, but no one was sure until she passed on and cursed the Bell family. Her spirit reportedly would throw pots and pans, spill sugar, slam doors, rattle chains, the typical. But his daughter Betsy would be pinched and scratched and even sometimes beaten by an invisible force. Anyone who visited the farm though reported getting no trouble from the spirit, but they could hear her voice. High, scratchy, and shrill, which would aggravate if she got angry. The tale of the Bell Witch became so popular that people from all over the country came to see if it was true. Some even say that Andrew Jackson visited the farm. John reportedly fell ill mysteriously one year, and many believe it was the doing of Kate. 200 years later, the farm remains an attraction, and many still report hearing a shrill, scratchy voice when no one is around and see orbs floating around the farm.
In our number 6 spot today, we have Marasica Irina Cornici. This scary story came to us pretty recently in 2005. A Romanian nun was 23 years old when she began to hear voices. Despite the knowledge of mental health and mental illness in 2005, because of her background, she began to believe it was the devil speaking to her. She was diagnosed and treated with schizophrenia, but she eventually ended up falling back into this dangerous way of thinking. This is when she became the subject of an exorcism. She ended up being bound to a cross, which is the scariest beginning of an exorcism I've ever heard of. After being bound, she was gagged with a towel and left in a convent room for 3 whole days without food or water. I'm honestly not trying to make a joke about this at all, but that seems like the laziest exorcism I have ever heard of. In the end, she ended up passing away from suffocation and dehydration. The priest involved as well as other nuns were charged and convicted in relation to this crime, but most have since been released due to their short sentences, and all still continue to blame the adrenaline administered during the ambulance ride for her death, which seems like a very convenient excuse.
Number 5, La Corriveau. I first heard the tale of Marie when I was very little, and it resulted in me sleeping with my hands over my ears for 6 straight months. Like, I was absolutely terrified. Marie was tried for the murder of her second husband and as a witch. Rumors about whether her first husband was murdered started during her second marriage, but no one could prove it. One theory goes that she poured mercury in her first husband's ear, dissolving his brain from the inside. That's why I covered my ears. I thought that was just an awful way to go. Her second husband, Louis-Étienne Dodier, was found with several head wounds in the barn. He was on bad terms with Marie and her father, and though initially they passed it off as horse trampling, the two were put on trial. Her father was condemned to hang, and Marie was given 60 lashes and branded with the letter M on her hand. But then Joseph, her father, admitted to only being an accomplice in the crimes, and it was in fact his daughter who did the deed. Marie confessed she killed him with a hatchet due to his mistreatment of her. She was sentenced to be hanged in chains and displayed for all to see in an iron gibbet, like a body cage. Soon, this is in Quebec by the way, the town began to fear her, for at night she would open her eyes and try to tear at anyone who would pass by from within the cage. This confirmed their suspicions that she was a witch, and they buried her in the gibbet, but it didn't keep her spirit trapped. Now she wanders at night near the river where she died, attacking any travelers who pass by. She is now solely known as La Corriveau.
In our number 4 spot today, we have the phone stalker. We all know that phones can be easily used to track our movements, but what if you found out that your phone was being tracked by a stalker? In 2007, 3 separate Washington state families began receiving a multitude of cell phone calls with eerily specific death threats being made to them. Families all explained that the calls came at random hours and included threats to all members of the family, including pets and grandparents. While a few families experienced this, one family in particular had the worst time with it. The family attempted to turn the phones off, got new ones with new numbers, switched accounts, everything they could, but they didn't get the calls or messages to stop. At one point, while finally explaining the situation to a police officer, all of their phones turned on and began calling each other. All the texts and calls were getting traced back to one member of the family's phone, but this was happening even when the phone was turned off. The parents took the phone away from her just to be sure, but the messages still continued on. Once while at the police station after returning home and powering on their phones, they received a voicemail which was a recording of their conversation they had just had at the police station, which let them know whoever was behind this was always listening. Whoever it was also always knew what they were wearing or eating, and once they changed their security system, the creeper called to let them know that he knew the new password. One family member was cutting limes in the kitchen when they received a message that said, "I prefer lemons." I wish this story had a better ending, but eventually the messages trailed off, and it is a mystery that remains unsolved.
Number 3, here we go. What is it with demons and dolls? Can't they just leave them alone, or can I expect all the old Barbies and Brat dolls I have to murder me? That would be nuts. This family thought they were safe buying their daughter an Elsa doll for Christmas in 2013. Nope. They were dead wrong, and not just because the parents would be tormented by constant Idina Menzel impressions. The doll had a button on its neck that you could press and it would say, "Let it go." For about 2 years it just said them in English, but then suddenly it started speaking Spanish too, which was weird, I guess. They had the doll for 6 years and never needed to change its batteries, which is also weird, and sometimes the doll would start singing even when the switch was turned off. In 2019 they decided to toss the doll, but the next day Elsa was inside the bench by the door. The kids said they didn't put her there, and the parents believed them because they wouldn't take out the trash, let alone dig through it. By this time the doll only spoke Spanish as well, I should mention. It just stopped speaking English altogether. They double bagged the doll, put it at the bottom of the trash can, and the trash was taken out that very same day. The next morning though, Elsa was waiting for them in the backyard. So they decided to mail the doll to their friend in Minnesota, who then taped the doll to the front of his bumper truck. That's one way to solve the problem, but I get it though. When you've got a special childhood toy, it can be really hard to let it go.
In our number 2 spot today we have Alex. This story comes from a Redditor by the username of Mom Says I'm Pretty, but we'll just call them Alex for today. This story starts off when Alex was around 5 or 6 after their parents had just recently separated. Alex's mom was living in a 2-bedroom apartment on the ground floor, and although Alex had their own bedroom right across the hall, they liked to sleep in bed with their mom when staying over at her house. So, one night Alex is sleeping in bed with their mom, and there's an open window that is right above the headboard of the bed. For whatever reason, Alex wakes up in the middle of the night and looks towards the open bedroom door into the hallway, where you can see slightly into Alex's room just across the hall. It's then that Alex notices the cat sitting in the doorway of the bedroom, which Alex thought was weird because the cat was always sleeping in the bed with them. This led Alex to wake up their mom, and in the 5 seconds it took to do that and for the mom to ask what was wrong, by the time Alex and the mom looked back to the doorway, they both saw a man standing by Alex's bedroom door, making his way out of the bedroom. Alex's mom sprung into action and quickly picked Alex up and threw them out the window that was behind the bed. Remember, they're on the first floor, so it wasn't that far of a drop, and followed behind Alex out the window shortly after. The mom began screaming for help and called 911, and of course the police came. They didn't find any signs of forced entry, but the front door was unlocked, which led them to believe the man exited that way. The mom swore she had deadbolted and chain locked the door before bed, so she just didn't understand how this could have happened. About a week later, while cleaning, the mom opens the water heater closet and finds a notebook with names and drawings, as well as a pair of gloves and some gum wrappers. This new discovery led both Alex and their mom, as well as the police, to believe that this man had been hiding away in the house, waiting for them to go to sleep.
And last but not least, we have literally anything involving Dr. Richard Gallagher. I've mentioned this guy before on MA, but honestly, ever since I've just been so freaked out. Richard Gallagher is essentially the go-to guy for the church when they're approached about performing an exorcism, to help distinguish between what's mental illness and what Richard calls the real thing. Gallagher is a certified Ivy League psychiatrist and calls himself a man of science. He heard of exorcisms but thought they were just ancient excuses for people with real mental illnesses, but now he firmly believes that demonic possession is real, without a doubt. Beyond the typical exorcisms, the turning point for Gallagher was when he met the Queen of Satan. It was one of the first cases he worked on, and a woman named Julie came to the church claiming possession. She was the queen of a satanic cult, so Gallagher wondered why, if she was indeed possessed, that she'd want to be rid of it. When he sat down to talk to her, she knew intimate details about his life, objects would fly off the wall, and once during a phone call with the priest, they both heard one of the demonic voices she used to speak around them, even though Julie was across the country. When he kept seeing cases like Julie, his views had to evolve, and now Gallagher lives in a world between reason and things that just can't be explained. It makes you wonder what could change the mind of a man of science to believe in possession. Number 10. This story comes from Reddit user Oscar Devine, and though it is far from demonic possession, I think anyone would find this story so terrifying this actually can happen. And the quote begins, "I've told this story before. I'm an eye doctor, and I had a patient come to me with an infected eyelid. 2 other eye doctors tried to treat and failed. They were dumping all sorts of medicine into it, and it wasn't getting any better, despite being on tons of meds. Apparently neither of them thought to flip the lid upside down, you know, that gross trick that some kids do with their upper eyelids. It was a painful maneuver for her very swollen eyelid, which might explain it. Anyhow, there appeared to be what looked like a visible abscess abscess inside the tissue with thick, gooey material, and I thought I'd give it a nudge and saw it move. This wasn't an abscess, it was something else. I managed to remove it quite easily in one whole piece. It was a fly larva. The patient told me that she had a bug hit her in the eye a few days before she got this infection. I removed the larva and within 2 days the wound closed and she was 100% recovered on basic antibiotic eye drops." Unquote. Can you imagine that? That sounds like what is it? Like a friend of a friend story, but that's actually real and he has photos to prove it. Gross. Alright, number 9. The Son of Sam. The year 1976 was a terrifying year to live in the Big Apple. Terror seemed to await around any corner, no one knowing if that day would be their last. The Son of Sam killings were spontaneous, and no one knew who would be next, only the killer himself. During that summer, David Berkowitz shot 6 people and injured 2, but Berkowitz believed he wasn't the only one to blame. The most mysterious part about this case is the fact that he blamed the entire thing on the neighbor's dog, who he believed was possessed by an ancient demon. The dog's name was Harvey, and David worshipped him. While in prison though, Berkowitz made an addendum to his confession stating that he was actually following the ritual practices of a satanic cult he took part in. Could this be a case of mental illness or an actual case of demon taking control? No one can ever really be sure, which I think makes this story that much more terrifying. Number 8. Zozo. There are literally more than 100 reasons why we shouldn't use a Ouija board. Not only have I heard stories from the internet, but I've had friends who've had terrifying first-hand experiences, but even for me, the temptation is always there. I'm just always just curious, you know? Who knows who or what you're gonna bring through, but Zozo seems to be a name most people hear. The first reported appearance of Zozo happened in 1816 in Picardy, France, after a young girl fell under an intense demonic possession. Later, when Ouija boards became popular in the 20th century, Zozo started to become more and more popular. Zozo is hailed as the spirit of the Ouija board who devours souls and changes lives, but if you get on their bad side. A user on ghostbase.com shared their story and it is terrifying. The family had used the board to communicate with their past loved ones, as I probably would too, and for a while it worked. The family was in tears as they spoke to the grandparents, but then the board switched, and when they asked who it was, it just spelled out OZ, 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 and continued. So they called it Oz. Oz, or Zozo as they found out later, had said that it had been them the entire time and that it simply read their minds for the answers. Terrified, they put the board away. Duh, as you should, and Oz was cursing and raging. They returned to the board a few weeks later and met with Oz again, who spouted nasty curses. So they put the board away again and the family experienced some intense bad luck. There are tons of stories like this and worse, so if you needed another reason to second guess joining the fun, well, here it is. Number 7. The Axe Murder House in Basilica. The Axe Murder House, if it weren't for a sign outside that literally says murder house, one might pass it without giving it a second thought. Just another abandoned home. That is, unless you know its dark secret. The windows are tightly closed and covered as if trying to keep something in. On June 10th, 1912, the family of Josiah Moore and their 2 guests were bludgeoned to death, and the walls of that house are the only witnesses to the crime and have concealed the identity of the killers for over 97 years. But that's not the only thing the walls keep trapped there. Audio, video, and photographic evidence of paranormal activity have given paranormal investigators a lot to talk about. The house is opened as a tourist spot and some tours have been cut short due to children's voices, falling and flying objects, moving ladders, and tons more. If you're brave enough, you can actually stay the night and see if the house will reveal any hint at who the killers were. That's like a horror film in the making, so if you want more scared, there it is. Number 6. Kennedy Ife. In 2016, Kennedy Ife lost his life in very mysterious circumstances. He began complaining of a pain in his throat, and by the summer of that year, he flew into a fever. His family, being deeply religious and connected to the Jesus Sanctuary Ministries in southeast London, they set about to cure him by performing an amateur exorcism. They restrained him for 3 days, which eventually led to the 26-year-old's death from dehydration and neglect. The whole family was arrested for manslaughter, but according to the BBC, they were all released and found not guilty. If in fact Kennedy was simply sick and died from mistreatment by his family, then the family should have been convicted. So why is it that the family got off scot-free for the neglect and torment of their son? Was it the fact that they found evidence of something else? Who knows? Number 5. Florida devil worshipping. In 2018, the plot of 2 young girls from Bartow, Florida was foiled before they were able to enact their evil plan. Apparently, they had planned to kill several of their classmates and drink their blood, possibly eat their flesh too. They brought several blades to school, including a butcher knife, a paring knife, scissors, and a pizza cutter, along with a goblet. The girls claimed to be Satanists and they planned the event over a couple of days. Thankfully, one girl warned her friend not to come to school that day, told the teacher, who called the police, who caught the girls. They apparently wanted to kill at least 15 people and planned to wait in the washroom for unsuspecting victims. At the home of one of the girls, they found a hand-drawn map of the school and found conversations on their phones with more details of their plan. The girls claimed to hail Satan but had no further ties to Satanism. In fact, Satanism as a religion is non-theistic, humanistic, and anti-superstition, according to Lucien Greaves, co-founder of the Satanic Temple. Beyond the statement, the girls had no further evidence of satanic practices, which leaves the question, what really got into these girls' heads? How did they arrive here? Were these 2 natural-born killers looking for an excuse? Or did the devil indeed make them do it? Number 4. In Indianapolis, possession. This case is one of the most infamous exorcism cases to hit the Indianapolis Star. Has over 800 pages of official records. The tales vary but surround the possession of 3 of the children who were allegedly possessed by demons. They would climb up walls, get thrown across rooms, and when their children were brought to the doctors, they would threaten them in voices darker than their own. This sounds like a horror film, so this makes the list. The records include interviews with police, DCS personnel, psychologists, family members, and Catholic priests. One report of one of the youngest girls recounts that she had a peculiar grin and walked backwards up a wall to the ceiling. Another one of the girls reportedly felt choked and held down so hard she couldn't speak or move. Another boy in the house would sit in a closet and speak to someone no one else could see. Some say this case has been debunked, while others still hold true to the impossible, that this haunting was so real that it's just too hard to believe. Number 3. The Watcher. Imagine finding your dream home only to find out someone else already possessed it. A New Jersey family never expected the events that would follow moving into their $1.3 million dream home. It was exactly where the family had always wanted to live, but no sooner after they first crossed the threshold, they began receiving mysterious letters. The letters were signed by the Watcher, who said that he was charged with watching the house and waiting for its second coming. The letters got more and more detailed, referring to their children by name and knowing every single move they made as if he was right across the street. The letters asked, and I quote, "Have they found out what's in the walls yet?" unquote, and would say dark things like, quote, "I am pleased to know your names now and the name of the young blood you have brought to me," unquote. Oof. But despite even the involvement of the FBI, they never discovered who the Watcher was. It was an extensive search, you guys, and they never figured it out. Sadly, the family was never able to sell the house at the value they bought it. They were forced to flee and file a lawsuit against the previous owners for not informing them. Duh. Number 2, Annalise Michel. The possession of Annalise Michel is one of the most controversial exorcism cases known and inspired the film The Exorcism of Emily Rose. But without the barrier of a film screen, the story is terrifying. More often than not, especially hundreds of years ago, no one understood the extent of mental illness and the torment it could cause, and many mistook it for possession. So upon hearing this story, it does sound like Annalise was suffering and in fact had a history of mental illness and epilepsy, for which she had been treated at a psychiatric hospital before. But when Michelle was 16, she relapsed and tried to take her own life, drank her own urine, and began to hear voices. But it was the fact that she spurned specifically religious objects and that no medicine seemed to ease her pain that the family begged a priest to investigate. 2 local priests secretly began their work and began treating her with exorcism rites. Over 67 exorcisms were performed over 10 months, ultimately resulting in her death. There are 43 cassette tapes that feature weird voices coming from Anne, and she even says the names of the demons. There's obviously a lot more to the story, and though many upon first hearing it believe it as a case of religious fanaticism gone wrong, the more you dig, the more the answers seem to get elusive. And last last but not least, the possession of Clara Germana. She was a Christian student at St. Michael's Mission in Natal, South Africa in 1906, but for some reason, perhaps in an act of curious rebellion, Clara made a pact with the devil when she was just 16. Days later, Clara was overtaken by dark impulses and repulsed by religious artifacts. She suddenly could speak and understand languages she'd never heard of, and by accounts, could read the minds of the people around her. When two nuns suddenly found her levitating 5 feet in the air, an exorcism was called on her. She tried to strangle one of the priests with his stole, and 170 people attest to seeing her levitate once again when he read the scriptures. It took 2 days to expel the demons from her body. For 6 years, Clara lived without a single demon, that is until she mysteriously died of heart failure when she was just 22 years old. Starting off number 10, Anne and Roger Brock. Roger and Anne thought they'd found the perfect home. It always starts that way, doesn't it? $5,000 for a house? In the 1970s, I should add. Still, what a steal. But of course, as soon as they moved in, their children started saying that they felt off. Like something was watching them and there were weird scratching sounds on the walls. They began to witness other strange things like religious items falling off shelves, waking up to their room being covered in frost, deep growls coming from underneath the floor, then shadow people appearing to be dripping wet at the ends of their beds. Roger Brock insisted that nothing was wrong and hadn't raised his kids to believe in spirits, but then when his youngest twins were baptized, they tried to get back into the house but couldn't. The door wouldn't move. Breaking into the library window, they discovered a bookcase that had been shoved against the door. The activity escalated with objects flying and attacking the family, but something good was in the house too. One day a picture frame flung at Anne and she reported feeling hands protecting her. Glass cut up the rest of her body, but where she felt the hands, she was untouched. Despite all of this, Roger and Anne never left until the house burned down mysteriously in 2005. Their daughter Lana has since dedicated her life studying paranormal activity and insists that there were 2 battles going on in that house, and she won't rest until she figures out why.
Coming in at number 9, we have the Somerton Man. This is another case that will keep you up at night. The Somerton Man was a mysterious, still unidentified man that was found dead on a beach in Australia in 1948. It was believed that he died of natural causes, maybe a heart attack. Then it was thought that he ingested poison, but no poison was found in his system. On top of that, the autopsy was unable to determine the cause of death. And there were no signs of violence. The more the police investigated into this case, the stranger they found it to be. The man was wearing a brown suit, but all of the tags had been cut out of his clothing, probably to avoid him getting identified. But the strangest thing though, is after re-examining the clothes, they found a hidden note rolled up in a secret pocket of his coat. The note read, Tomin Shud, hopefully I pronounced that right, meaning the end or finish in Persian. To this day, we still don't know who this mysterious man is. But just recently, the case has been reopened, so let's hope we get our answers soon.
Number 8, the sleep app. Some people use sleep apps to record their sleeping habits because why not? Maybe your partner said you snore in your sleep or make a weird whistling sound. But this Reddit user named Jenny discovered something she truly wished she hadn't. Jenny had been using a sleep app for a while to help track her sleep and would sometimes play them back. Usually she heard the typical murmurs and grumbles until one night things took a terrifying turn. At first, she kept hearing a weird clicking sound that kept getting louder and louder, but eventually a deep voice broke through and unmistakably asked, "What are you doing?" Then another voice answered and said, "Nothing." Later on, the voices can be heard saying, "That's them," and "I'm dead." There were no signs of break-in and the voices don't sound anything like her. I can't imagine how Jenny must have felt. There are some things that we just can't unhear.
In our 7th spot, we have Friends Until the End. In the 1980s, 2 friends from Arkansas, Don Henry and Kevin Ives, went out hunting together. But it was illegal hunting. Basically, they planned on spotlighting, which is when you shine a light in the animal's eyes, causing them to freeze, and then the other individual shoots them. On the night of August 22nd, the 2 set out to an area behind Henry's house where there were some train tracks. 2 hours later, their bodies were found resting on the train tracks. They had been run over by the train. But this case isn't a simple one at all. The coroner proposed the idea that the 2 had smoked 20 joints and then passed out on the tracks. And then that's when the train ran them over. 20 joints? No, that's very hard to believe. Upon further investigation, it was found that one of the boys was dead and the other was unconscious before the train ran them both over. Now, the question that everyone wants the answer to is what happened to these friends? Who killed them and why? One theory is that a drug drop was going down in that area and they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. They witnessed this happen and were killed as a result. But we don't know this for sure. Either way, it's a very scary and mysterious case.
Number 6, you in real life. Okay, so this story isn't necessarily to do with hauntings or possession, but definitely possessive. Read this story on Reddit and it's literally what would have happened if the lead character in You confessed to a friend at a bar. Imagine being this guy. This story is from Reddit user Big Chief Wawa, and it essentially recounts the moment he realized his friend was creepy AF. Starts off with his friend talking about how he's trying to get his high school sweetheart back because she's the one that got away, and he asks, "What's your plan?" Well, first he befriended one of her friends on Facebook, then he scoured her Facebook to see locations his ex showed up in to figure out where she lived, Scotland. He then spent every holiday away from work hanging out in those areas waiting to accidentally bump into her. The second time he stayed in a hotel in Scotland where she lived, bumped into her and lied and said his company had moved him to Scotland. He gets her number. He then pretends to move in, sets their date up for a weekend, stays in a hotel, complains that it's hard to find a let, but got a week-by-week place that's super expensive. All the while she has no idea what's going on. But eventually he convinces her to let him move in. Oh, and this guy saved $10K specifically so he could pull this off. Needless to say, our Reddit user's jaw was on the floor and didn't really hang out with him after that, but they stayed friends on Facebook, where he saw that his plan actually appeared to work, though a few years later he was living with a different girl in Canada. So who knows what happened to the one that got away, but I hope it wasn't anything close to what happened in the show You.
We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the witch elm tree. This case has always creeped me out. It's genuinely so unnerving. So basically in 1943, 4 boys in Stourbridge, England were out looking for birds' nests when they found something terrifying in an old witch elm tree. They discovered a decomposed body of a young woman stuffed inside. A gold wedding ring was on her left hand while her right hand was sawed off. This woman was around 35 years old and had apparently been in the tree for 18 months. Now, when this body was discovered, no one knew who it belonged to. That was until graffiti started appearing around town. The graffiti wrote, "Who put Bella down the witch elm?" This message kept appearing all throughout England and Europe, on buildings, random walls, you get it. No one knew who was writing these messages, but it was assumed that her name was Bella and someone knew that. And then to make matters worse, over time police began to lose evidence and even misplaced her body. Now, there are a couple of theories behind who she is. Number 1, she was a woman that was involved in a spy ring back in World War II. Or number 2, she was a spy's lover. Or number 3, she was sacrificed by witches. The most well-accepted one, though, is that she was a woman named Clara, or Clarabella Bauer. She was a singer in Germany who fell in love with Gestapo agent Joseph Jacobs and was killed for being associated with him. Either way, this case always just left me so unsettled.
Number 4, abandoned hotel. This next story also comes from Reddit, and I don't know if it's supernatural or not, but either way, it's gut-wrenchingly terrifying. I don't want to watch the movie that would be made about this should the worst have happened. Like, it just sounds so horrific. I was unable to find the name of the original poster, so we were just gonna call her Sarah. Sarah was heading back from a late road trip, and instead of driving through the night, she decided to stop at a motel she passed. It looked pretty run down, but better than risking it. When she walked up to the front desk, the man looked disturbed to see her, and she remarked that his eyes just looked wrong. She wasn't getting some very secure vibes from the guy, who hardly said anything when he passed over the keys. Sarah headed to the room and was disgusted. There were cockroaches everywhere, it smelled weird, and there were dark stains. So she just decided to sleep in her car in the parking lot. Better option than bedbugs. She woke up a little past 1 to the sound of footsteps and was terrified to see a group of men walking into the room she was supposed to be staying in. She obviously hightailed it out of there, and when she finally reached home, she called the police. When the police called back to report what they'd seen, they said that not only didn't they find anything, but that the hotel hadn't been in use for years.
In our 3rd spot, we have Xavier Dupont. Don't even get me started with this case. I first heard about it after watching the show Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix, and it left me so angry and just mind blown, okay? So basically, back in 2011, French aristocrat Xavier Dupont and his family left town. He told his friends and family that he was a secret agent, and they all had to leave to go into witness protection. That was a lie. Later, his family's bodies, including their dog, were found buried in the garden, but Xavier was nowhere to be found. He obviously became the prime suspect, and it was discovered that he had purchased cement and shovels prior to him leaving. To this day, Xavier has never been caught. We don't know where he is now or why he even killed his family. But it's thought that it had to do something with money issues, and he didn't want to seem like a failure to his family. But we really don't know. And to make matters worse, back in 2015, police received a note from him. He sent them a picture of his family, and on the back, he wrote, "I am still alive from then until this hour," and then signed it off with his name. He's still out there somewhere, just taunting the police.
Number 2, don't let me die. Especially over the last year and a half, doctors and nurses are and continue to be subjected to horrors and tragedies daily. This story is from a posting on allnurses.com, and there are no shortage of freaky things that they encountered. One of their patients was a man who had a variety of ailments that unfortunately he wasn't going to be able to recover from, but he was insistent that he had to stay alive. Every time his heart monitor beeped, he would rage at the nurses to keep him alive, screaming, "Don't let me die," over and over and over again. But one night, the nurse rushed in with emergency supplies and nearly dropped them when she saw the man floating 2 inches above the bed. He was laughing, or not he exactly, but something else. The nurse said, and quote, "His whole look completely changed. His eyes had a look of pure evil, and he had this evil smile on his face. He laughed at us and said, 'You stupid aren't going to let me die, are you?'" After that, the man went into cardiac arrest and passed away 20 minutes later. 5 minutes after, the patient apparently sat back up, started laughing, and a voice said, "You let him die, too bad." An agonizing scream then filled the hall, and the words, "Don't let me die," echoed through the unit, unquote. It wasn't until the morning the voices stopped. Nobody went anywhere by themselves after that.
In our number 1 spot today, we have the Circleville letter writer. This next case is going to blow your mind, but also confuse the heck out of you and scare you. So in 1976, individuals in Circleville, Ohio started receiving handwritten letters from a mysterious person. This mysterious person knew personal details about these individuals and claimed to be watching them. One word, creepy. In one of these letters written to a woman named Mary Gillespie, she was accused of having an affair with the school superintendent. She worked with the school as a school bus driver. Her letter read, "I know where you live. I've been observing your house and know you have children. This is no joke. Please take it seriously." Then Mary's husband Ron received a letter as well, informing him that he would be in danger if he didn't stop the affair. Like, who is this person and how did they know everything about this couple? But wait, there's more. On August 17th, 1977, Ron got a call from this writer. Later, Ron was found dead in his car. He had crashed into a tree and his gun had been fired. No one knows what the heck happened to him. Years later, the writer also tried to take Mary's life, but then failed to do so. Eventually, Mary's former brother-in-law, Paul Fresher, was connected to the attempted murder of Mary and was sentenced to 7 to 25 years in jail. But here's the freaking plot twist, everybody. Paul claimed he was innocent, and he actually was. While in jail, the Circleville letter writer wrote to him, taunting him. So he was set up. And to this day, no one knows who this writer is and why he did what he did.